evening, all. Welcome to Cancer Healing Journey Talks. Myself, Annie Jose from Community Outreach Team of ZenOnco.io and Love Heals Cancer. Cancer Healing Journey Talks helps cancer survivors and caregivers to share their journey with vast number of survivors and caregivers who have traveled or been traveling through this journey. This can inspire and motivate them for their faster recovery as well. I would like to introduce today's speaker, Mark Meadors. He is a colorectal cancer survivor and he is also an employee benefit consultant at Sunstar Insurance Group. So welcome to today's session, Mark. So over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I believe we were talking before this, before we actually started the recording, about my what type of cancer I had. It was stage 3C rectal cancer that was very high up at the rectum sigmoid colon junction. So it had perforated the wall of the rectum and was in 5 to 6 lymph nodes in my pelvic area. I was initially diagnosed for April 22nd of 2020, which of course is right in the middle of the whole COVID surge. What's interesting in that and I'll talk about this a little bit later, but according to the American Cancer Society, the type of cancer that I had along with its advanced stage, it really has like a 16 to 20% survival rate or something like that. I don't know. Or that they can totally get it the first time, you know. And so, you know, my symptoms, okay, this is so funny. I had a root canal in March the 12th of 2020. And the antibiotics that they prescribed actually irritated the tumor mass in my rectum. So I was basically bleeding out. So I have a brother who's a radiologist, and he initially thought it was colitis. So he called me and he said, I've called the emergency room or emergency department, told them what I think it is. They are waiting on you going out. So I did, because and even though it was more than a month later, I had stopped taking my dose of antibiotics for my root canal, hoping that would go away, because I've experienced some somewhat similar, you know, issues in the past with it. But they did a CAT scan and they found a 9.5 centimeter mass or tumor. It was incredibly slow growing, according to my oncologist and surgeon, who both said that I most likely had what would have been classified as cancer since about 2014 or 2015, which, hindsight being what it is, it's, you know, looking back at it now, I was like, yeah, I had some problems, but I'm kind of a big guy. And so I was able to kind of power through that. For the most part, I thought maybe I had a hemorrhoid or something. I didn't have any real bleeding or, you know, or massive bleeding or anything like that. So at any rate, and, you know, you guys had asked me what my first reaction was when I got to know that I was diagnosed with cancer, and how did my family take the news? Well, you know, since I just said I'd suffered from the effects of the tumor for several years, I thought, because when I was first diagnosed, I was 51, almost 52. And so when you look back at the preceding 5 years or whatever, I was in my, you know, I was like 45, 46 years old. So I thought initially, I was like, okay, you're middle-aged, you're out of shape, you need to do what, you know, you need to exercise. Well, that would just make it worse. then all of a sudden, I figured that I was suffering some sort of mental depression or, something like that. So after the initial shock of finding out that I had cancer, I was actually relieved because I was like, yes, I'm not crazy. So, um, the only thing was is that uh, my ER doc said, we want to go ahead and keep you overnight, prep you to give you so you can have a colonoscopy tomorrow. And I really kind of started crying because back then in the US, at the height of the first COVID wave, the only way somebody could go into the emergency room with you is if you were like intubated or, unconscious, incoherent, whatever. And so I really kind of started tearing up and I told my doctor, I said, I can't do that. And he said, well, why not? And I said, well, first I've got to go home and tell my wife and my kids, and then I've got to figure out how I'm going to tell my parents. And so, of course, they were all pretty much devastated. But I told everybody then that, that I've got this, and that I told my daughters not to worry, that their daddy was going to walk them down the aisle. And so felt worse for my parents. My mother has dementia. And so I know the stress of that was, pretty hard on her. So beginning on May the 7th of 2020, I began the first of 27 radiation treatments. I had already started taking 3,000 milligram daily dose of Xeloda, or the generic version is capecitabine. They're the chemotherapy tablets, which is really good because unlike the bad chemo, you don't suffer from the nausea. I mean, all the really effects or whatever. And yes, all of this is, I can thank my father for all of that. So, but I didn't lose my hair or, anything like that. I was kind of about the first week and a half or 2 weeks, I was very worried to the extent that I had my wife drive me the 10 minutes to get my radiation treatments because I just did not feel comfortable driving down the block, much less, to a place where I had to get on the interstate and get off real quick and have my treatments. But it was pretty funny because my oncologist, my radiation oncologist, I asked them both the same question. Of course, my regular oncologist is the one who prescribed the Xeloda chemotherapy tablets. And then, of course, my radiation oncologist is the one who, dialed me in for my actual radiation treatments. And I asked them both. I said, all right, guys, at this time I weigh about 250 pounds, give or take. I said, do you have it dialed in to the maximum for my height, weight, build, et cetera, et cetera? And they said, yes, we do. And I kind of started smiling and I said, okay, good. Now I want you to increase it by like 5 to 10%. My radiation oncologist looked at me like I was crazy. And he was like, why do you want to do that? And I kind of started smiling and I said, well, don't worry. I've got a pretty strong will and I promise you that you're not going to kill me. So he kind of started laughing a little bit, and I believe he did. He kind of dialed it up a little bit. So then the other treatments that I had were really after, like I said, after about 2 weeks, after the blood supply to the tumor was cut off, the tumor itself started shrinking. I swear to God, I felt like I was 35 years old again. I mean, I felt amazing. to the extent that I was able to do yoga, ride my bike, work out, meditate, do all of the things that I needed to do to get myself. I was mentally ready for the radiation and chemo, but then on September the 30th of 2020, I had my first surgery, which I really didn't want to have because the PET scan that they did about 2 weeks prior came back and it showed almost a complete clinical response, which was amazing. Nobody could believe that. Then when they went in, they resected a portion of my rectum, and it showed a 0.5 millimeter little dot that was left over. So it went from 9.5 centimeters to 0.5 millimeters. And at that time, everybody pretty much came out and said, you no longer have cancer. And the problem is that when they do that type of surgery on you, they'll give you a temporary colostomy bag, but they didn't make what I call the ports large enough. So they sent me home after like 7 days after my first surgery. And then 24 hours later, I was taking the first ambulance ride of my entire life back to the hospital, where after a few days of tests and everything else, they came to the conclusion that the ports that, helped, empty the waste into my bag were not large enough. And so every time I would kind of shift or move, I would pinch them off. And so my surgeon told me, he said, you're not going to like this. I'm basically going to put a wound on top of a wound. I was like, okay, cool. So I spent basically the entire month of October in the hospital. Then in fact, one of my surgeon's partners who was covering his call, and Little Rock, Arkansas is a, pretty small, close-knit, tight medical community. And these guys work with my brother almost on a daily basis because he reads all their, most of their films and, all that. And so at any rate, this doctor came in and he was covering call for my surgeon. And I said, hey doc, I'm Mark Meadors. Very nice to meet you. And I said, how are you doing today? He says, well, I'm not doing very well. I said, really? Why is that? He said, well, because a sibling of a colleague who we respect a lot, we work with a lot, we consider to be a friend, everything that pretty much could have gone wrong with this individual has gone wrong. And of course he meant me. And I just started smiling and I was like, look, man, y'all haven't killed me yet and y'all aren't going to. So, let's just get all that out of our heads. And at that point, he kind of started smiling and he said, fair enough. So I left the hospital, like I said, the week of Halloween, which that in 2020, I believe, was on a Saturday. The next Tuesday or Wednesday, I turned to my wife, which I had expressed that I had something else going on. And I told my wife, I said, I promise you, I'm not trying to be a baby about this whole deal, but there's something wrong. So she took me to the ER, basically dropped me off. I go in, they do a CAT scan. They found that an abscess had totally encapsulated the part where my surgeon had sewn my rectum together, and it was infected. So they started me immediately on intravenous antibiotics, as well as, to add insult to injury, my brother's group stuck a little, drainage little wire up in my right butt cheek so as to be able to drain the abscess. Then in I got out of there after about 4 or 5 days. Was able to wait until I had what was known as the takedown surgery in December, where they take the temporary bag off and they reconnect all the plumbing, everything like that. When I got out of the hospital, when I first went in for my first surgery on September the 30th, I weighed about 248 pounds. And when I got out, I weighed 186 pounds. So I lost like 62 pounds, which is approximately 28 kilograms. So, you guys had asked me if I had tried any alternative treatments. What I wanted to do was that I had read, because I'm an employee benefits consultant, so I have access to a lot of, published studies about my specific form of cancer. And I had read, let me make sure I get her name right, Dr. Angelita Haber Gama from Sao Paulo, Brazil, had developed what is known as the watch and wait protocol. So for somebody who has what is known as a complete clinical response to the radiation and the chemo, which I basically had, then they watch you very closely for the first year. It's like a once a month deal, whereas now I'll have like a CAT scan every 6 months. I'm also due for a colonoscopy because last September was my 1 year anniversary. So next month I'll be getting both a CAT scan as well as a colonoscopy. But I wanted to try that alternative treatment. Unfortunately, Memorial Sloan Kettering in New York, they were really the only group that was, doing what they call the watch and wait protocol. However, I had already started my regimen of chemotherapy and radiation, so I was immediately disqualified from that study. So, y'all asked me how I managed my emotional well-being, and I just put with a strong will, hard head, and sheer determination. I knew the odds. I chose to ignore them. Honestly, felt good about it from the start. And again, as I spoke about 2 weeks into my radiation, I was like, I've got this deal. I'm what you would call a plan of action guy. So once, they kind of lay the roadmap out for me and say, this is what we're going to do, when we're going to do it and all that, I'm like, perfect. So then it gives me the time to mentally get myself ready. So basically I was ready to whip my cancer is all I like to say. As far as my support system, I would use social media a lot, because one of the things that they don't tell cancer patients, and what I quickly found out, is that my family was under as much, if not more, stress than I was. And whereas they were doing everything they could to give me support, the problem is that when they try to give me support, they start crying, which is kind of, it's almost self-defeating in my mind. So I would post updates on social media like Facebook, and the outpouring of encouraging words that I received. I mean, number one, I didn't know I had that many friends, but then it was just I mean, just like I said, the outpouring of support, to say the least, was almost overwhelming. It made me feel really good inside. Um, Another thing that to a little bit later, I also had some counseling, because a lot of people don't realize that, when you come through a journey like this, you're really almost suffering from PTSD. And I had some pretty horrible experiences during my 4 separate stays in the hospital. So I needed somebody to kind of help me work through that. Um, and so, but my experience with doctors and medical staff, my oncologist and radiation oncologist, and the techs who administered the radiation, they were amazing. In fact, the techs used to call me a freak of nature, because, again, once I started feeling well, I kind of felt bad, because I would be at the Carti Cancer Center in Little Rock, Arkansas. And if you lined up, let's say 10 other cancer patients in front of me that are taking the bad chemo, they're sick, they've lost all their hair, I know the odds. I know that 3 or 4 of those poor souls are going to be with us in 12 months. And I'm asking the nurses if the day-old donuts are still good. I mean, they just never really say anything like that. The hospital was a little tough because of COVID and other reasons. They had an acute nursing shortage, and I freely admit, and I told them this when they rolled me out of recovery, I'm like, I can tell you this right now, I'm not the best patient on the planet, but I'll make it up to you. So I buy them dinner, or I buy them all lunch, and do those things. So you'd ask what things that helped me and made me happy during this journey was the fact that I had such a good response to the radiation and chemo. I was able to spend almost that entire summer working out and getting myself ready physically for my surgery, as well as I meditated to mentally get myself ready, which looking back at it now, if I was not able to do that, I may not be here sharing my story of experience, strength, and hope with you right now. Did I ever feel like that there were times where it was too much to handle? And no, I didn't. I mean, I never once felt that way, because in my mind, failure was not an option. So did I make any lifestyle changes? Well, I had to change my diet. They wanted me to go to eat more protein, which, in a house full of women that love pasta and all of those things, I kind of had to do my own deal while they did their own deal. I still eat a fraction of what I used to eat. And I still don't weigh as much as I did when I graduated my senior year in high school. So, has cancer changed me in a positive way? Without a doubt. I call cancer one of life's great resets, in that it lets you know what's important. It's God, it's family, it's friends, and that if I can try to be the best person that I can be, coworker, whatever, then, I was never a really big materialistic guy to begin with, but I'm really not now. I just know that if I do the job that I need to do, that I'll be able to take care of my family. Both my daughters are in college, so, it's just 100% about being the best person that I can try to be. So, one of the other questions was, what would be my message to cancer patients and caregivers? And I kind of want to read this verbatim just so you'll kind of know, but, it would be to stay strong, never lose hope, and keep fighting like a warrior. Do whatever you're able to do to stay as physically strong as possible. meditate, do yoga if you're able, work out if you're able. I understand that different people have, different treatments, that they may not be able to do that. But learning how to meditate was key for me because it really helped get my mind in the right spot. And as you know, I mean, it's mind, body, spirit. So, um, you know, also, I alluded to this earlier, know that your family is undergoing as much worry and stress as you are. So look to others for support like I did. Social medias can be really good, and it can be a great way to garner a lot of encouragement and support. And no matter what, be patient with others like your caregivers and or family, is they really don't have a clue what you're going through. I mean, unless we've, had a family. I mean, I've never had a family member other than my late father-in-law who went through anything remotely close to what I've been through. But you need to be open and honest with them about it. How you're feeling. If you aren't having a good day or whatever else, you kind of need to stay in bed. This is the one thing my wife couldn't understand when I got home from the hospital. They said, "Well, you got to get up and walk and get the blood flowing and all this other stuff." Well, I mean, I had lost so much weight. I mean, I kind of had to psych myself up to be able to get up and go do the things that I needed to do. But also recommend to people is, as hard as it may be, study your type of cancer backwards and forwards so you can learn as much as possible. Know what, if any, other options exist. Ask questions, and don't ever be afraid to get a second opinion. Do not accept the status quo. If you don't like the answers that you're getting, or they're giving you, you keep asking them to repeat themselves and kind of dumb it down, out of this, I mean, my oncologist is one of the smartest human beings I've ever known in my entire life. He's family friend and all that, but he sometimes has a problem putting it in a manner to where even I could understand. And I'm college educated. I mean, I consider myself somewhat to be on the fringe of the entire medical profession because I, sell group employee benefits here in the U.S. and know your rights. And, I'm lucky that I know how to get through the maze of the U.S. healthcare and insurance system, but sadly, I failed to practice what I preach to all of my clients and their employees, and that I didn't take the time to read the patient bill of rights, and blindly signing things away. And that when you have some of the pretty severe complications that I had, I mean, I'd pretty much given all that away. I mentioned earlier, I never really wanted to do the surgery. Felt like that I had pretty much a near or total complete clinical response. But I was kind of coerced, not only by people in the medical community, I mean, my brother being one of them, and some others, to go ahead and have the surgery. But the moral of the story is that if you're uneasy about what's being recommended or just don't want to follow their recommendations, then don't do it. Seek another opinion, because that is absolutely your right. Now, when you get a second or a third opinion, they may tell you the exact thing that your original oncologist told you. So we have to go back with hat in hand and apologize to them and say, hey, I just want to make sure, I'm investigating everything that I had. Also, and this is one of the things that I teach the people that I, get signed up on health insurance for. But if you have what I call a big ticket claim like cancer, don't pay anything more than the copay initially. Reason for that is that, like, I had my radiation and chemo, I had all of that stuff coming in, I had doctor's office visits, I had colonoscopies, I had CAT scans, PET scans, then I had all these different surgeries and everything else. Well, they were all hitting it around the same time. So I would tell the outpatient surgical clinic where I was getting my colonoscopy that, this is all I'm going to pay you right now, because all the claims are coming in at the same time. I also told the hospital that the 4 separate times that I had to check in, that we'll get everything, settled up at the end. I mean, I had a really good health plan. I had a very low deductible. I mean, my out of pocket wasn't just a huge amount of money, but, um, you know, what happens is that people will just start blindly writing these checks, and then all of a sudden they realize that they're owed money back. Well, who are they owed money back from? The insurance company, or the doctor, or the hospital, or whatever else? And then that's a whole other can of worms that is open. Also know that if, regardless if everything goes very smooth with the radiation, chemo, and the surgery that somebody may have, that they will, or whoever's listening to this will most likely suffer from some type of PTSD. I did, and let me tell you something, it's okay. It's just kind of all part of it. It's all completely normal. Don't be ashamed of it or be afraid to seek help, because if you don't, then you're going to let it build up. And of course, what we have seen, particularly during the time of COVID and all the quarantining and all of those things, we've seen alcoholism and suicide rates and drug addiction rise, and that's one of the things that, I have unfortunately seen and read about in cancer patients. And that, if they recognize that, hey, I went through a pretty big deal and I probably need to talk to somebody about it, it'll be the best thing that they ever did. Lastly, and that this was one of the things that they didn't really tell me. I mean, when they kick you out of the hospital the last time, it's like, okay, see you later, have a great life. Do not be afraid to make your oncologist and or surgeon tell you what your estimated recovery time will be. They sometimes will be overly optimistic or whatever. Again, I had several complications. I finally, in April of 2021, went into my surgeon's office, and I just basically went off on him. And I just said, man, I love you like a brother, but given the complications that I've had and everything else, what is my estimated recovery time? Because I'm having a hard go at it right now. I mean, it was nearly impossible for me to have a bowel movement, and when I did, it was incredibly painful. In that, also, if you need to have something like physical therapy or whatever, ask for it. Either your surgeon or your regular doctor will be more than happy to prescribe the physical therapy. I had close to 45 physical therapy sessions. The first 10 was just to gain enough strength in my legs and my buttocks so I could walk in a straight line. I kid you not. I mean, it was just awful. So, you guys ask, how did I overcome my fear of treatments or of the side effects? Well, as I mentioned, I really had no fear. I faced it head on with a laser focus and with the strength and sheer determination of a herd of elephants, is, kind of how I like to say it. And I never really had any side effects. So really I was blessed in in that regard. Obviously I did have complications resulting from my multiple surgeries, but hey, I was physically and mentally, ready to accept whatever they were going to tell me. I mean, my oncologist was telling me, you may have to take some more chemotherapy after all of your surgeries are over. I mean, they could not, nobody could believe that I was 100% cancer free. And in September of 2021, I had my 1-year scan, and that was also 100% clean. So, at any rate, when did I first feel like that I could beat this disease? On April 22nd, 2020, when they first discovered the mass. But I just knew deep down inside that if I got myself mentally and physically prepared, I had it whipped, which thank God I was able to, do that. But basically I just always knew. I mean, I knew the odds, and again, I refused to accept what the odds were. I was making my own odds. And here's the other thing is that, with cancer spreading to my lymph nodes, I'm pretty realistic about it in that I know the odds. It may not happen 5 years from now or 10 years from now, but there's a there's a better than average chance that it will manifest itself someplace else in my body. They say that the first two places that it goes to is either the liver and or the lungs. And so I am now 53. The way I look at it is if I can make it to 70, 71, 72 without having anything and something comes back, then I will consider it to be a blessed life and one that has been well lived. I'll also tell you, in 2005, I have a history of alcoholism in my family. And at that time, both my daughters were very young. And so I just made the decision on my own to quit drinking, and I joined Alcoholics Anonymous, and I went to meetings. I had been involved in an intervention of a close family member several years earlier. And the principles that AA taught me are the exact same principles that I used when I faced my cancer, in that I can't do it alone. I've got to have the support of others. As they sometimes say here in the US, it takes a village, to be able to rally around somebody and all of that. But it gave me the blueprint to be able to share my feelings and updates in a constructive way that would not be offensive to anybody, So here's something else that's really cool that happened through my posting of my updates on social media. I had 4 to 5 friends that had sent me a direct message and said that because of you, I went and had my first colonoscopy. Of those 5, 3 of them they found polyps. 2 of them, they were precancerous. And so all of those were removed. So they basically said, because of you, you basically saved my life, which I was like, know something, if cancer gets me right now, then, I've done my job by raising awareness of colorectal cancer and, the what not to do, because as I said, I went 5 years not doing anything, even though I had some initial symptoms or, whatnot. But, one of the other things she'd ask is, what do you think about the stigmas attached to cancer and the importance of awareness for it? I think most people don't realize that, the main causes of death are due to either heart, lung, or brain-related issues and or cancer. you know, and that I think with most people, the biggest stigma is that they believe that cancer is an automatic death sentence. But truth be told, most types of cancer, if detected early enough on, they're very treatable and very curable. I mean, medical science in the past 10 to 15 years has come so far. I mean, if I'd been diagnosed a year and a half later, they could have actually gone in and taken the tumor out with what they call the gamma knife, which is a very focused beam of radiation. There's no incisions, there's no anything like that. And they basically could have zapped whatever was, left. Awareness in the US has increased a lot over the years, especially about early detection being so important. Problem is that with colorectal cancer, you can't necessarily get, see or get the information, let's say, from a blood test. I mean, you've got to have other symptoms and you got to go in and then be referred and then have, because in my case, I was 51 when I was first diagnosed. However, insurance in the United States did not pay for a colonoscopy until somebody turned 50. It wasn't until about 3 months after my initial diagnosis that they changed that age to 45. Had I had a colonoscopy when I was 45, there's no telling, how different everything would have been. So, you had asked me, said that please pronounce the name of your company, ZenOnco, ZenOnco. You asked my opinion about what I think about your work. I said, I've looked at your website and you seem to be quite thorough in your approach and the support you give cancer patients. I really like it, as well as how you share the patient success stories on other social media platforms like LinkedIn, because that's the only way to get the word out, and those are the types of things that's kind of how I first saw y'all and then kind of started following y'all. And it was just, it was very cool. And the last question you asked me is that if I could sum up my journey in one sentence, then what would it be? And I can do it in one word: blessed. I am blessed, because, what really could have and maybe probably should have been a death sentence, it wasn't. It was, through a combination of having some fabulous doctors, oncologists, everybody else that quickly got me into treatment. And it's just amazing. I had a friend of mine. I grew up with her. She's a year younger than I am. She wound up. She had a mass in her upper, right up in there, and she actually kept it hidden from her husband. And last week, she had to be taken from home to the emergency room in an ambulance, where during that, I guess the mass had either gotten around a blood vessel or something, but it burst in the ambulance, and that she almost bled out. And in fact, they had to revive her a couple of times, and she was on the table. Unfortunately, sepsis had already set in. She had already started going into renal failure, and unfortunately, this past Saturday, she passed away. So, when I first heard about it, obviously I was kind of devastated. I was kind of scratching my head going, how did I survive? And, somebody like her didn't, who was in better health than me and, all of that. I just, I just, I just have to wonder about things like that sometimes. But I feel like that, God needed her more than we did. And that God needed me to be on this planet to help others that are in a similar situation that I've been in, or just generally if they're in an accident or whatever else, because of what I do for a living, which I love very much. So that's kind of all I've got. Do you have any
That was
questions?
great. No, you have answered all the questions. So thank you so much, Mark. So it was such a lovely session, and I'm pretty sure that this session will really motivate the patients and survivors out there. So thank you so much once again.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Thank you for allowing me to tell my story, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.
Great. Thank you.